Hi guys, I'm Ashley Shannon and I am doing my integrated ELA social studies presentation. The activity I'm going to be using is leveled questions or differentiated questions, and this is going to help speaking and listening skills by modeling my own thinking if the students can't think of the answers to the questions. So I'm going to be using my Think Aloud to model it. When I'm reading, I'm going to require students listen with a question in mind. And I'll do that by reading the question I'm going to ask on that page before I read the passage. And anchor charts for vocabulary. I'm not going to post these for this video, but these are the anchor charts for the vocabulary for this book I would have displayed. There's a little red dot for each of the words I'd be using. The vocabulary is also illustrated in my activity. This is going to help all the students in the class for gauging their comprehension and adapting my questioning to their level of comprehension that they have. It's also going to help ELL students at different levels and ESE students, and any student really can benefit from this, struggling readers, anything like that. So I'm just going to jump right in because this book's a little long. I prepped this book ahead of time with my differentiated questions. So this is just an example of the cover ones. I already taped it, and so these are my higher questions. These are my lower questions, and see, they relate to the anchor chart for the vocabulary words as well. So I would start by introducing the book, The Rough-Faced Girl, and I would ask first, look at the front cover of this book. Who and what do you think this book is going to be about? So if my students didn't answer, I would model thinking aloud by noticing her bandages. So this girl has bandages and she's covering her face, and her face kind of looks like she has some scratches or burns or things like that. And she has a feather in her hair, and I'm not quite sure why yet. And so I want to read so I understand. And then for your lower level questions, you can ask, notice the girl's skin. What looks charred? What looks rough? And then ideally, these students could either answer in 1 to 2 words, or they could point to where they see the corresponding answer to that question. Long ago, there was a village by the shores of Lake Ontario. Now here is a vocabulary. So to help my students listen with intention, I would ask the question first and then ask them again after I read the page. So I'm going to say, this is a wigwam. After this passage, I'm going to ask you to show me where you see a wigwam in this story. Off from the other wigwams of this village stood one great huge wigwam. Painted on its sides were pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And inside this wigwam there was said to live a very great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome invisible being. However, no one could see him except his sister, who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry this invisible being, but his sister said, only the one who can see him can marry him. So, can you point to where you see a wigwam in this page? And then they would point. So again, I would ask, I'm not going to ask both just for a time essence of this book. This book's kind of longer. I would just model the higher question. So guys, while you're listening, how would you feel if you were the rough-faced girl? So now in this village, there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. The 2 older daughters were cruel and hard-hearted, and they made their youngest sister sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, sparks fell on her. In time, her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms too became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those 2 older sisters laughed at her, saying, "Ha! You're ugly, you rough-faced girl. And they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. So, how would you feel if you were the rough-faced girl? So, this one I would model, maybe I'm going to take turns, model the lower thinking question. And you would say, this is our vocabulary, proud. Proud is when you feel accomplished. You feel good that you did something. You want everybody to know about it. This is our anchor illustration of the word proud. I'm going to read this passage and you tell me who you think is proud, or even where you hear proud in the text. One day, these two older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces. Give us some new buckskin dresses. Give us some pretty beaded moccasins. We're going to marry the invisible being." So their father gave them these things. Dressed in their finest, the two girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared. "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those two girls were proud and hard-hearted before, they were even prouder now. They walked haughtily through the village. At last they came to the wigwam of the invisible being, and there was his sister waiting. Can you show me or tell me or point to the characters you see are proud? I can see that there's some people looking out of their wigwams, and then I see the two sisters walking through the village. Can you show me where the characters are that are proud? Or, if you wanted to differentiate it, you could ask them to find the word proud in the text. "Why have you come here?" she asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why we're here." "If you want to marry my brother," she replied, "you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can't you see how pretty we are? Can't you see the beautiful clothes we wear?" "Oh yes, anyone can tell that we have truly seen the invisible being." "All right," said the sister. "If you think you've seen him, then tell me, what's his bow made out of?" And suddenly her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. So how do you, before I read this, to have this in your mind, how do you think the sisters of the how do you know the sister of the invisible being is angry with the two older sisters? "His bow?" they stammered in surprise. Oop, here's the illustration, sorry. I lost my place. "His bow?" they stammered in surprise. "His, bow. We know. But turning desperately to one another, they whispered, "What shall we say?" "Let's say it's the oak tree," they said. "It's the great oak tree." "No," said the sister of the invisible being. "No." Oh, she saw at once how they lied. "Tell me," she continued, "if you think you've seen my brother, the invisible being, then what's the runner of his sled made out of?" We know, cried those two sisters, but whispered feverishly to each other again as they wondered, "What shall we say? What shall we say? Let's say it's the green willow branch." "No," said the sister when she heard. "No, you haven't seen my brother. Now go home." "Just test us fairly," they exclaimed. "We've seen him. Just don't ask us all these silly questions." So how do you know the sister of the invisible being is angry with the two older sisters? And again, if no one answered, I would think aloud and model it. So I'm thinking about how the sister's talking to the invisible being sister is talking to the two older sisters of the rough-faced girl. I can see in the text that she has capitalized letters and exclamation points. And then on the other page, it said, her voice grew as swift as lightning and as strong as thunder. And then it also says in here that she thinks that she sees how they lied. So all those things would make me think that she's probably mad at the sisters, or she's angry or unhappy because she knows that they're lying to her. All right, said the sister of the invisible being, come with me. And as she took them back to the great wigwam and sat them in the seats furthest from the entrance, the guest seats, soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters... Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading. I'll read it like this. Soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters still couldn't see a thing. Suddenly, a great bow and beaded quiver of arrows appeared in the air and were set down. But though the two girls sat there, their eyes wide, all through the night, they never saw a thing more. And in the morning, they had to go home ashamed. So I have more questions, higher and lower level questions on each one of these pages. But since I'm at 11 minutes already, I'm just going to read the rest of the book for the read aloud, and I'll describe more of the activity in the post. This is a lot left. Okay. The next day, the rough-faced girl went to her father and said, "Father, may I please have some beads? May I please have a new buckskin dress and some pretty moccasins? I am going to marry the invisible being, for wherever I look, I see his face." Her father sighed. "Daughter," he said, "I'm sorry. I have no beads left for you, only some broken little shells. I have no buckskin dress, and as far as moccasins, all I have left are my old, worn, cracked, and stretched out pair from last year. They're much too big." But she said, "Whatever you can spare, I can use." So he gave her these things. Then she found dried reeds, and, taking the little broken shells, she strung a necklace. She stripped birch from the dead tree and made a cap, a dress, and leggings, and with a sharp piece of bone, she carved in the bark pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. She went down to the lake shore and soaked the moccasins in the water until they grew soft. Then she molded them to her feet. But they were still too big, and they flapped like duck's feet as she walked. Then all the people came out of their wigwams. They pointed and stared. "Look at that ugly girl," they laughed. "Look at her strange clothes. Hey, hey, hey! Go home, you ugly girl. You'll never marry the invisible being." But the rough-faced girl had faith in herself, and she had courage. She didn't turn back. She just kept walking right through the village. As she walked on, she saw the great beauty of the earth and the sky spreading before her. And truly, she alone of all in that village saw these things, the sweet yet awesome face, saw in these things the sweet yet awesome face of the invisible being. Whoop. At last she came to the lake shore just as the sun was sinking behind the hills, and the many stars came glittering out like a fiery veil in the darkening sky overhead. And there, standing by the water's edge, was the sister of the invisible being, waiting. Now the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman. When she looked at you, she didn't just see your face, hair, or clothes. No. When she looked at you, she would look you right in the eye, and she could see all the way down to your heart. She could tell if you had a good, kind heart or a cold, hard, and cruel one. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once through her skin, though her skin was scarred and her hair burnt, her clothes strange, she had a beautiful, kind heart. And so she welcomed her dearly, saying, "Ah, my sister, why have you come?" And the rough-faced girl replied, "I have come to marry the invisible being." And I'm going to stop right there. You guys can pick up this book. Super awesome. I'm at 14 minutes, so I'm going to go. Thanks.